Stop holding on to what God told you to release. Listen to me carefully, because somebody needs to hear this today. There are some things in your life that you keep asking God to bless, but God has already told you to let them go. There are some doors you keep knocking on, but heaven has already closed them. There are some relationships you keep trying to revive, some memories you keep replaying, some opportunities you keep mourning, and some seasons you keep wishing would return. But what if the thing you are calling a loss is actually an answer? What if the ending you are fighting is the beginning you have been praying for? Sometimes God does not remove something from your life because he wants to punish you. Sometimes he removes it because he knows where it is taking you. He sees what you cannot see. He knows what is happening behind the door you keep trying to reopen. He knows what that relationship would cost you if you stayed. He knows what that opportunity would become if you continued. He knows what that environment would do to your spirit if you remained there. And sometimes the greatest act of faith is not holding on, it is releasing. I know release is difficult. I know what it feels like to love something and still have to walk away from it. I know what it feels like to have invested years, emotions, hopes, dreams, conversations, sacrifices, and prayers into something, only to reach a place where God whispers, "This is no longer yours." And you say, "But God, I worked for this." And God says, "I know." "But God, I loved them." "I know." "But God, I thought this was my future." "I know." "But God, what am I supposed to do now?" And sometimes the answer is simply, "Trust me." That is one of the hardest answers to accept because we want details, we want explanations, we want timelines. We want to know what is coming next before we release what is behind us. But faith does not always give you the map. Sometimes faith gives you enough light for the next step. And that next step may be away from what you thought you could never live without. You have to understand something. Just because you prayed for something does not mean you are supposed to keep it forever. Sometimes God allows you to experience something for a season, not for a lifetime. Some people were lessons. Some places were preparation. Some relationships were chapters. Some opportunities were bridges. Some disappointments were protection disguised as pain, and some endings were divine redirection. You cannot keep calling something mine simply because you once prayed for it. There comes a moment when you have to ask yourself, is this still where God is leading me, or am I holding on because I am afraid of starting over? That question will change your life, because sometimes we are not holding on because something is good. We are holding on because something is familiar. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar freedom. You know the pain of that relationship. You know the disappointment of that environment. You know the frustration of that situation. You know how it feels to keep hoping for change. But you do not know what life will feel like without it. And because you do not know, you become afraid. You say, "At least I know what I have." But hear me today. You were not created to live your entire life clinging to what is familiar simply because you are afraid of what is next. There is a whole world waiting on the other side of your obedience. There is peace waiting on the other side of your release. There is clarity waiting on the other side of your surrender. There is strength waiting on the other side of the moment when you finally say, "God, if you told me to let it go, I will let it go. Not because I understand, not because I am ready, not because it does not hurt, but because I trust you more than I trust my own understanding." That is faith. Faith is not pretending that you are not hurting. Faith is hurting and still believing. Faith is crying and still walking. Faith is feeling the emptiness of an ending and still believing that God has not abandoned you. Faith is looking at a closed door and saying, "If God closed it, I do not need to break it open." Some of you have been exhausting yourselves trying to make something work that God has already released you from. You keep explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand you. You keep proving your worth to people who were never assigned to recognize it. You keep chasing opportunities that repeatedly reject you. You keep returning to places that repeatedly break you. And every time you leave, you say, "Maybe this time will be different." But sometimes the lesson is not that you need to try harder. Sometimes the lesson is that you need to stop going back. There is a difference between perseverance and disobedience. Perseverance says, I will continue because God told me to. Disobedience says, I will continue even though God told me to stop. You must learn the difference, because there are battles you are fighting that you were never supposed to fight. There are doors you are trying to open that God intentionally locked. There are burdens you are carrying that God never asked you to carry, and you are exhausted because you keep picking up what heaven told you to put down. Put it down. Put the resentment down. Put the obsession down. Put the need for an apology down. Put the need to understand every detail down. Put the person down. Put the old version of yourself down. Put the past down. Put the fear of tomorrow down. You cannot walk into a new season while dragging an old season behind you. You cannot embrace what God is bringing into your life while your hands are still full of what He told you to release. Your hands have to become empty before they can receive something new. Think about that. Sometimes you are praying, God, give me more, while God is saying, make room, make room, make room for peace, make room for healing, make room for purpose, make room for better relationships, make room for opportunities you cannot see yet, make room for the person you are becoming, because the future requires space. And sometimes the reason you feel stuck is not because God has stopped moving. It is because you are still holding on. You keep looking backward, wondering why the past did not work. But perhaps God is trying to get you to look forward. There is nothing wrong with remembering. There is nothing wrong with grieving. There is nothing wrong with admitting that something mattered to you. Release does not mean it meant nothing. Release means it no longer controls you. You can appreciate what something taught you without asking it to teach you the same lesson again. You can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive someone and still maintain distance. You can be grateful for a season and still refuse to live there. You can acknowledge the beauty of yesterday without sacrificing tomorrow. That is maturity. That is strength. That is surrender. And I want you to hear this clearly. Releasing something does not mean you failed. Sometimes walking away is the victory. Sometimes saying no is the breakthrough. Sometimes closing the door is the answer to the prayer you were too afraid to pray. You may never understand why it had to end. You may never receive the apology you wanted. You may never get the explanation you deserved. You may never see the reason immediately. But you do not need to understand everything to obey God. You only need to trust the one who sees everything. There are things happening behind the scenes that you cannot see. There are dangers you will never know you escaped. There are disappointments that will eventually make sense. There are prayers being answered in ways that do not look like answers yet. You think God is taking something from you. Maybe He is protecting something in you. Maybe He is protecting your peace. Maybe He is protecting your future. Maybe He is protecting your character. Maybe He is protecting your purpose. Maybe He is protecting you from becoming someone you were never meant to become. So stop measuring God's goodness by what He allows you to keep. Sometimes God's goodness is revealed in what He asks you to surrender. And yes, surrender can hurt. Let it hurt. Do not be ashamed of the tears. Do not be ashamed of the grief. Do not pretend you are stronger than you are. Bring the broken pieces to God. Bring the unanswered questions. Bring the disappointment. Bring the loneliness. Bring the memories. Bring everything. But do not build a permanent home inside temporary pain. Cry, but keep moving. Grieve, but keep moving. Fret, but keep moving. Pray, but keep moving. Because there is still life ahead of you. There is still purpose ahead of you. There are still mornings you have not seen. There are still doors you have not opened. There are still people you have not met. There are still prayers you have not prayed. There are still versions of yourself you have not discovered. Do not let one ending convince you that your story is over. It is not over. Sometimes God has to remove what you love so you can discover what you need. Sometimes He has to disturb your comfort so you can grow. Sometimes He has to separate you from people so you can hear your own calling again. Sometimes He has to empty your hands because He is preparing to fill them with something greater. And when that moment comes, do not run backward. Do not romanticize what broke you. Do not rewrite history just because you are lonely. Do not confuse missing someone with needing them. Do not confuse familiarity with destiny. Do not confuse attachment with love. And do not confuse a closed door with rejection from God. A closed door can be divine protection. A delayed opportunity can be divine preparation. A painful ending can be divine redirection. Trust the process even when the process does not feel good. You have survived endings before. You survived the day you thought you would never survive. You survived the goodbye you thought would destroy you. You survived the disappointment you thought would define you. You survived the season when you did not know what tomorrow would bring. And you are still here. That means there is more in you. There is more strength in you. There is more courage in you. There is more purpose in you. So today, make a decision. Stop holding on to what God told you to release. Stop begging the past to become your future. Stop asking dead seasons to produce living fruit. Stop trying to resurrect what God allowed to end. Open your hands. Let it go. And when your hands begin to shake, trust Him. When your heart begins to ache, trust Him. When you feel uncertain, trust Him. When you cannot see the next step, trust Him. You may not know where the road is leading, but God does. You may not know what is coming, but God does. You may not understand why this had to happen, but God does. And one day, you may look back at the thing you were begging God to keep and realize that losing it was the beginning of finding yourself. You may look back and say, now I understand. But until that day comes, keep walking. Keep believing. Keep praying. Keep becoming. Do not let fear make your decisions. Do not let loneliness make your decisions. Do not let nostalgia make your decisions. Let faith make your decisions. If God told you to release it, release it. If God closed the door, stop standing outside it. If God removed the relationship, stop chasing it. If God ended the season, stop trying to recreate it. And if God is calling you forward, go with tears in your eyes if you have to. Go with questions in your heart if you must. Go while your hands are trembling. Go while you are still healing. Go before you feel completely ready. Because sometimes obedience does not feel like confidence. Sometimes obedience feels like taking one trembling step and saying, God, I do not know what is ahead of me, but I know you are ahead of me. So I will release what you asked me to release. I will trust what you asked me to trust. And I will walk into the future without demanding that the past come with me. That is where your freedom begins, not when you understand everything, not when everyone apologizes, not when the past changes. Your freedom begins when you stop fighting what God has already decided. So breathe, open your hands, Lilith, and walk forward. There is still a life waiting for you. There is still purpose waiting for you. There is still peace waiting for you. And what God has prepared for you will never require you to destroy yourself just to keep it. Let go. Trust God. Keep walking. Your next chapter does not need your past to approve of it. There comes a moment in your life when you have to decide whether you are going to trust what God said or trust what you feel, because your feelings will tell you to hold on. Your memories will tell you to hold on. Your fear will tell you to hold on. Your loneliness will tell you to hold on. Your history will tell you to hold on. But sometimes God will whisper into the deepest place in your spirit and say, release it. And that word can feel like a storm. Release the relationship. Release the expectation. Release the dream you thought would happen exactly the way you imagined it. Release the person you thought would stay. Release the opportunity you thought was your breakthrough. Release the version of yourself you have outgrown. Release the need to know why. Release the need to control what happens next. And when God asks you to release something, He is not asking you to become empty so that you can suffer. He is asking you to become empty so that you can receive. There is a difference. You have spent so much time thinking that holding on is proof of strength. You have been taught that if you really want something, you fight for it. You have been told not to give up. You have been encouraged to keep pushing. And there is a time to fight. There is a time to persevere. There is a time to stand your ground, but there is also a time when the strongest thing you can do is open your hands. There is a time when strength looks like surrender. There is a time when courage looks like walking away. There is a time when faith looks like saying, God, I wanted this, but I want your will more. That is where spiritual maturity begins, because anyone can trust God when God gives them what they wanted. Anybody can praise when the door opens. Anybody can celebrate when the prayer is answered exactly according to their plans. But can you trust him when the door closes? Can you worship when the opportunity disappears? Can you remain faithful when the person leaves? Can you continue believing when the plan changes? Can you say, God, I still trust you, when you have no idea what he is doing? That kind of faith changes you. That kind of faith gives you roots. That kind of faith teaches you that your identity cannot be attached to what God gives you, because everything God gives you is temporary compared to who God is. People can leave. Positions can change. Money can disappear. Opportunities can close. Seasons can end. Circumstances can shift. But your relationship with God cannot be built on circumstances. If you build your identity around what you have, you will lose yourself every time something leaves. If you build your identity around who loves you, you will lose yourself every time someone walks away. If you build your identity around your career, your appearance, your possessions, your achievements, your relationship status, or your reputation, then every change will feel like a personal destruction. But when you build yourself around God, you discover something powerful. You can lose something without losing yourself. You can experience rejection without becoming rejected in your own eyes. You can experience abandonment without abandoning yourself. You can experience an ending without believing that you are finished. You can release someone without releasing your dignity. You can lose an opportunity without losing your purpose. You can lose a season without losing your future. You can lose what was familiar without losing your direction, because your foundation is not the thing you are standing on. Your foundation is the one who is holding you, and there is a tremendous freedom in knowing that. You do not have to force people to stay. You do not have to manipulate circumstances. You do not have to chase every opportunity. You do not have to convince someone to recognize your value. You do not have to beg a closed door to open. You do not have to fight for what God is telling you to release. Because when you become faithful to God's direction, you stop measuring your life by what remains and start measuring it by whether you are walking in obedience. That is a different way to live. The world says, keep whatever makes you comfortable. Faith says, keep whatever God has assigned to you. The world says, never let go. Faith says, no when God is asking you to release. The world says, if you lose it, you failed. Faith says, sometimes losing what was never meant to remain is part of winning. And sometimes the greatest evidence that you trust God is that you can let something go without becoming bitter. You can release it without becoming cruel. You can walk away without needing revenge. You can close the chapter without destroying the book. You can say goodbye without wishing evil upon someone. You can accept the ending without spending the rest of your life trying to prove that you were right. That is freedom. And freedom does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop allowing what you cannot control to control you. There are people who are still living emotionally inside conversations that ended years ago. They are still arguing with someone who is no longer present, still trying to prove their innocence, still replaying what was said, still imagining what they should have said, still wishing they had responded differently, still asking why they were treated that way, still waiting for someone to understand the pain they caused. But at some point you have to say, I will not spend another year trying to get closure from someone who may never give it to me. You have to let God become your closure. You have to let obedience become your answer. You have to let peace become more important than being understood. Because if you make your healing dependent on another person's apology, you have handed them control over your future. They can keep you waiting forever. But when you say, I forgive, I release, and I move forward, something changes inside you. You are no longer waiting for them to give you permission to live. You have given yourself permission to live again. And sometimes God asks you to release something because you have made it too important. You may not realize it, but sometimes you are holding on to a thing so tightly that you cannot hear God anymore. You are praying about it constantly, thinking about it constantly, worrying about it constantly, checking for signs, looking for messages, trying to predict outcomes, trying to make things happen. And all the while, your soul is exhausted. God may be saying, put it down, not because he does not care, but because he cares about you more than you care about the outcome. You may be asking God to change the situation while God is trying to change you. You may be asking him to restore something while he is preparing to redirect you. You may be asking him to bring someone back while he is teaching you how to move forward. And sometimes you do not recognize an answer because you were expecting the answer to look like restoration. But the answer may look like release. The answer may be distance. The answer may be silence. The answer may be a closed door. The answer may be a relationship ending. The answer may be an opportunity disappearing. The answer may be a season becoming uncomfortable enough that you finally stop resisting the next one. Do not underestimate the wisdom of divine discomfort. Sometimes discomfort is the alarm that tells you it is time to move. Sometimes the thing that once felt right begins to feel heavy because you have outgrown it. You are not always losing something. Sometimes you are becoming too large for the place you once fit into. And when God is growing you, he will often require you to release things that once defined you. The old identity, the old habits, the old environment, the old expectations, the old relationships, the old fears, the old excuses. The old version of yourself that believed you had to be accepted by everyone. You cannot become new while constantly negotiating with the old. There comes a time when you have to say, that was who I was. That was what I knew. That was what I tolerated. That was where I stayed. But I am not going back, not because you think you are better than anyone, but because God is calling you somewhere different. And when God calls you forward, everyone will not understand. Some people will call your boundaries selfish. Some will call your distance pride. Some will accuse you of changing. And maybe you are changing. That is the point. You were never meant to remain exactly the same. Growth changes your standards. Healing changes your tolerance. Wisdom changes your choices. Faith changes your priorities. And obedience changes your direction. You have to become comfortable with being misunderstood when you are following God. Because if your entire life depends on everyone understanding your decisions, you will never make decisions based on conviction. You will make them based on approval. And approval is a dangerous master. It will keep you in places God told you to leave. It will make you say yes when God told you no. It will make you keep relationships that are draining you. It will make you explain yourself to people who do not deserve an explanation. It will make you betray your own peace just to avoid disappointing someone else. But you cannot spend your life protecting everybody else's feelings while abandoning your own obedience. There is a holy courage that comes when you finally realize that obedience may disappoint people. You may have to disappoint someone to obey God. You may have to say no. You may have to leave. You may have to stop answering. You may have to stop explaining. You may have to stop rescuing. You may have to stop giving chances that God never told you to give. And that does not make you heartless. It makes you discerning. You can love people without allowing them to destroy your peace. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can care without carrying everything. You can pray for someone without remaining attached to their behavior. You can wish someone well without following them into their chaos. That is what it means to release without losing yourself, because sometimes we think release means losing our heart. It does not. Release you means freeing your heart from what it was never designed to carry forever. You were not designed to carry resentment forever. You were not designed to carry guilt forever. You were not designed to carry rejection forever. You were not designed to carry another person's choices forever. You were not designed to carry the weight of controlling outcomes. There are things that belong in God's hands, and your future belongs there. Your relationships belong there. Your dreams belong there. Your unanswered questions belong there. Your disappointments belong there. Your past belongs there. You do not have to carry what God has already promised to handle. Sometimes you are exhausted because you are trying to be God in your own life, trying to predict everything, control everything, fix everyone, protect yourself from every possible disappointment, guarantee every outcome. But that is not your assignment. Your assignment is obedience. Your assignment is faithfulness. Your assignment is to take the next step. God did not ask you to know every step. He asked you to trust him with the next one. And that is enough. You do not need to know where every road ends. You need to know who is guiding you. You do not need to know how every problem will be solved. You need to know who holds your future. You do not need to know what tomorrow contains. You need to know that tomorrow is not outside God's sight. That is why you can release, because release is not falling into nothing. Release is falling into trust. And sometimes trust means letting go while your heart is still attached. You may still miss it. Let yourself miss it. You may still love them. Let yourself love them from a distance. You may still remember the good moments. Let yourself remember without returning. You may still wish things had worked out. Let yourself acknowledge that without reopening the door. Healing does not require you to erase your history. It requires you to stop allowing your history to dictate your future. You can remember without returning. You can honor without repeating. You can appreciate without possessing. You can love without clinging. You can grieve without giving up. You can release without becoming empty. And when you become faithful to God's direction, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop panicking when things change. You stop assuming every ending is destruction. You stop chasing every person who walks away. You stop begging every door to open. You stop believing that every rejection means you are not enough. You begin to understand that God can redirect you without destroying you. You begin to understand that what leaves your life does not automatically take your purpose with it. You begin to understand that your value is not determined by who chooses you. You begin to understand that your future is not dependent on one relationship, one job, one opportunity, one city, one season, one person's approval, one chapter, one failure, one disappointment. You are bigger than the thing you lost. You are bigger than the door that closed. You are bigger than the rejection. You are bigger than the mistake. You are bigger than the season. Because your life is not defined by what happened to you. Your life is shaped by what you choose to do with what happened to you. And if God is asking you to release, then let your release become an act of worship. Say, God, I give this back to you, not because it did not matter, because it mattered deeply, not because I am not hurt, because I am hurt, not because I understand, because I do not, but because I trust you. That is the prayer. I trust you more than I trust my attachment. I trust your direction more than my desire. I trust your timing more than my impatience. I trust your wisdom more than my emotions. I trust your plan more than my preferences. And when you pray like that, you begin to change. You stop asking, how can I keep this? And you start asking, what is God teaching me through this? You stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, who am I becoming because they left? You stop asking, why did this door close? And start asking, what direction is this closing forcing me to consider? You stop asking, how do I get my old life back? And start asking, what new life is God inviting me into? Those questions create movement. Those questions create maturity. Those questions turn pain into preparation. And preparation is often uncomfortable. Because God may be preparing you for something that requires a different version of you. You cannot take the same mindset into the next season. You cannot take the same standards, the same fear, the same insecurity, the same dependency, the same need for validation, the same attachment to control. Something has to be released. Maybe God is not only asking you to release a person. Maybe he is asking you to release the version of yourself that needed that person to feel worthy. Maybe he is not only asking you to release an opportunity. Maybe he is asking you to release the belief that one opportunity determines your entire future. Maybe he is not only asking you to release the past, maybe he is asking you to release the identity you built inside the past. Because sometimes what you need to release is not outside of you. It is inside of you. The fear, the bitterness, the insecurity, the shame, the obsession, the need to control, the constant need to be chosen. The belief that you have to earn love. The belief that you have to chase what is meant for you. Release it. You do not have to chase what God has assigned to you. You do not have to manipulate what God is orchestrating. You do not have to force what God is arranging. You do not have to beg for what God has already prepared. And when something leaves, you do not have to collapse. You can breathe. You can pray. You can grieve. And then you can keep walking, because your life is still moving, your purpose is still alive, your calling is still alive, your future is still alive. And the fact that something ended does not mean God stopped writing. The page turned. That is all, the page turned. And you may not like what was written on the previous page. You may have cried over it. You may have wished you could edit it. But you cannot live forever trying to rewrite a page that has already been turned. Ride what it taught you. Honor what it changed in you. Take the wisdom, take the strength, take the lesson. But do not carry the entire chapter into the next one. There is a difference between remembering where you came from and living there. You can remember. But keep walking, you can miss it. But keep walking, you can be disappointed. But keep walking, you can be afraid. But keep walking, you can have questions. But keep walking. Because obedience does not always come with certainty. Sometimes it comes with trembling hands and a faithful heart. Sometimes it comes with tears running down your face as you make the decision you know you need to make. Sometimes it comes when nobody applauds you, nobody understands you, nobody encourages you. Sometimes you have to obey God in silence, and that silence can feel lonely. But loneliness is not always evidence that you are on the wrong path. Sometimes loneliness is simply the space between the old environment and the new one. You have left what was familiar, but you have not yet arrived where you are going. That middle place can feel empty. But do not mistake emptiness for abandonment. God may be clearing the room because he is preparing something new. Do not rush to fill the space. Do not immediately replace what you released. Do not run back simply because the silence feels uncomfortable. Sit with God. Let him teach you what the empty space is for. Let him rebuild your identity. Let him restore your confidence. Let him show you that you are still whole, because you were whole before they came. You were whole while they were there, and you can be whole after they leave. Your wholeness does not belong to another human being. Your purpose does not belong to another human being. Your future does not belong to another human being. Your peace does not belong to another human being. And when you understand that, you stop making permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. You stop saying, I cannot live without this. You begin saying, I do not know how I will live without this, but I know God will teach me. That is faith. That is growth. That is surrender. And perhaps today you are standing at the edge of a release. Perhaps you already know what it is. You have known for a while. You have felt it in your spirit. You have tried to negotiate with it. You have tried to ignore it. You have tried to make excuses. You have said, maybe things will change, maybe. But what if God is asking you to stop waiting for change and start walking in obedience? What if the peace you are asking God for is waiting on the other side of the decision you are afraid to make? What if your breakthrough is not another door opening? What if your breakthrough is finally having the courage to walk away from the wrong one? What if your freedom is on the other side of your release? Then open your hands. Not because you know what is coming. Open them because you trust the one who knows. Release the person. Release the outcome. Release the timeline. Release the expectation. Release the old identity. Release the need to be understood. Release the need to control. Release the fear. Leave the past. And let God decide what stays. Let God decide what goes. Let God decide what grows. Let God decide what ends. Let God decide what begins. Because when you become so faithful to God's direction that you can release anything without losing yourself, you discover that the deepest security in life was never found in possessing things. It was found in knowing who you belong to. You realize that you do not have to hold everything to be whole. You do not have to keep everyone to be loved. You do not have to control everything to be safe. You do not have to understand everything to have peace. You only have to keep returning to the one who gives you direction. And when he says move, you move. When he says wait, you wait. When he says stay, you stay. When he says release, you release. Not because you are weak, because you have finally learned that obedience is stronger than attachment. Faith is stronger than fear. Peace is stronger than control. And God's direction is more trustworthy than your desperate desire to keep something, simply because you are afraid of what life will look like without it. So let your hands become open. Let your heart become teachable. Let your spirit become quiet enough to hear. Let your faith become stronger than your fear of loss. Let your obedience become stronger than your attachment. Let your trust become stronger than your need for certainty. And when something has to leave, do not immediately ask, how will I survive without it? Ask, who will I become now that I am free to follow where God is leading me? Because there are places you cannot enter while holding the old thing. There are relationships you cannot recognize while emotionally attached to the wrong one. There are opportunities you cannot see while staring at the door that closed. There are prayers you cannot hear while obsessing over the prayer that was not answered the way you wanted. There are parts of yourself you cannot discover while trying to remain who you were. So release it, not recklessly, not bitterly, not with hatred. Ail it with faith, reliseel it with dignity. Release it with gratitude for what it taught you. Release it with courage for what lies ahead. Release it knowing that God is not asking you to walk into nothing. He is asking you to walk with him. And if you can walk with him without knowing every detail, if you can obey without having every answer, if you can surrender without knowing what you will receive in return, if you can release without allowing the loss to define you, then you have reached a kind of spiritual freedom that no person can take from you. You become steady. You become grounded. You become difficult to manipulate because your direction does not come from people's approval. You become difficult to destroy because your identity is not attached to circumstances. You become difficult to control because you are no longer terrified of losing what God has told you to release. And there is power in that kind of person. A person who can walk away without becoming bitter. A person who can forgive without forgetting wisdom. A person who can lose without losing themselves. A person who can say goodbye without believing that life is over. A person who can stand alone without believing they are abandoned. A person who can enter a new season without dragging the old one behind them. A person who can look at a closed door and say, I will not force it. A person who can look at an ending and say, I will not worship what God told me to release. A person who can look at uncertainty and say, I may not know what is next, but I know who is leading me. And when you become that person, you stop fearing release. You begin to see release as preparation. You begin to see surrender as strength. You begin to see endings as invitations. You begin to see empty hands as evidence that you are ready to receive. And you begin to understand that sometimes God has to remove what you were holding so tightly, because he knows that if you kept holding it, you would never reach for what he was trying to place in your hands. So if you are standing at that crossroads today, breathe. Do not rush. Do not panic. Do not run backward, simply because forward feels unfamiliar. Remember what God has already brought you through. Remember the doors he opened. Remember the doors he closed. Remember the things you once thought you could not survive. You survived them. And perhaps this release is not the end of your strength. Perhaps this is where your strength is being revealed. Perhaps this is where you finally learn that you can lose something and still wake up with purpose. You can cry and still have faith. You can hurt and still obey. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can be disappointed and still believe. You can release what you love without losing who you are, because your identity was never in what you held. Your identity was always in the one who called you. And when you know that deeply, you can open your hands without fear, step forward without having every answer, leave without needing everyone to understand, trust without seeing the whole road, and keep moving with the quiet confidence that whatever God has asked you to release cannot compare with the life, purpose, peace, and transformation He is still leading you toward.